Vince McMahon has returned to WWE as chairman. Man, this story gets crazier and crazier and crazier. So last year, Vince McMahon stepped down as chairman and CEO of WWE because there was a scandal that was reported by the Wall Street Journal and several other news outlets about how he was essentially paying money, and lots of money, millions, to certain women in the company, employees, and in some cases contractors, to give him sexual favors. And the scandal really picked up momentum, but it never really went to trial or anything like that. Wasn't that he didn't commit a crime. It was just that he paid a woman hush money. I guess you can maybe say it's prostitution, but not really. So Vince decided to step down. And since then, what happened was Nick Khan and Stephanie McMahon were named CEOs of the company, co-CEOs, and Triple H was named he was named the chairman of creative. So he's basically the lead booker. So now Vince is back. Now the story going on with Vince is that the reason as to why he returned to the company is because there is an imminent sale of WWE. I've talked about this for a while now. If you listen to my old podcast, the KLB, we discussed it. This is not new information. If you have been following the insides of the business, you know that Vince has been wanting to sell WWE for years. And obviously people back in the day would never have believed it, including me, years and years and years ago. But when UFC sold to ESPN Plus, when the pay-per-views, well, really it was when they sold to Endeavor, and then when the pay-per-views got sold to ESPN Plus for billions, Vince was like, hey, maybe someday we can cash out. Now, from what I understand, the money that he wanted for WWE, the main suitors that were interested in buying WWE as a whole, they didn't want to pay what he wanted. I believe the figure was in the billions, 5-6 billion, something like that. I think I heard once 8 billion, and nobody wanted to pay that much for it. Now UFC sold for 4 billion, and while UFC is a better pay-per-view company than WWE, WWE is a bigger company overall, especially internationally. It may not seem like that, but they are. They've been around longer. I mean, they have equity. They have different television deals. Some would say even better ones than UFC. I would agree with that, even though ESPN is a great place for fights. But this is not about comparing those two. So, apparently Vince came back, and he brought back George Barrios, and I think her name's Michelle Wilson, the former CEOs. And they're basically, from what we understand based on what came out, he's only back to facilitate the sale of the company, because the sale of the company is imminent. I had heard just a month ago, I want to say a month or 2 months ago, that Amazon Prime was now, interested because of how well the NFL on Thursday nights was doing on Prime. So the NFL might want a piece of, Amazon might want a piece of WWE. NBC Universal and Apple have shown interest. We'll see what happens. But basically, this sale of the company has been a thing for a while. Now, Vince is saying he's only back to make sure the sale happens. And let me just get this out of the way. Legally, because of the amount of shares he holds, he can do this. He's not breaking a law. He actually never even had to step down if he didn't want to. He voluntarily stepped down. It was his choice. But now he's back because of a couple reasons. One, he wants to make sure that this sale goes through with him supervising it, and if it does go through, that's for the right amounts. And two, because he wants to make sure that he at least has some kind of position in the company when the sale happens. If he stayed away and the sale happened, it could have been a situation where the new owners of WWE wouldn't allow him to even be involved in creative, especially with the scandals, or even the simplest things, even marketing, anything. But with Vince coming back, he wants to make sure that when the sale happens, he still has some form of income, even though if the sale does happen, he'll be a billionaire, even more than he is now, and so will his family. A lot of people have wondered, why is this sale happening? Like, why is WWE selling? And the reason is because WWE is... It's one of those things where people don't seem to understand, like, okay, they thought that Triple H and Stephanie were going to take over the company, and they kind of have now in a way, but people have to understand that maybe Stephanie and Triple H don't want to run WWE and be the owners. Maybe they just want to do their own little jobs. Maybe Triple H's kids and Shane's kids, maybe they don't want WWE. So, are you going to keep it in the family, or are you going to sell it to somebody else? And then just cash out, and then you've got generational wealth for the rest of your family. For years, decades, in fact. That really is the question. And none of us are in their family meetings. None of us are in their, their talks about why they're selling it, what they're doing, etc. But to me, it just, when people sell things like George Lucas sold Star Wars, he thought he was too old to make a Star Wars film, and he wanted to just cash out and then create generational wealth for his children without them having to run anything. And that's pretty much what's going on right now. At least I think that's going on right now in WWE. But the question, of course, is, does this mean that Vince will be back in creative? But he says no, however, I'm not sure about that. Yes, Triple H is still the official guy in charge of creative, but Vince's fingerprints could end up being on creative once again. And that sucks, because even though WWE is not perfect, even though some of their shows are very forgettable, Triple H's run for the past 6 months has been a breath of fresh air for the company. And even though, like I said, he's made some mistakes, the majority of the shows have been at least a little bit better. Longer matches, better matches, which is not always good. More of a focus. He's brought back a bunch of guys that he, really worked with a lot, like Gargano and Karrion Kross and Bray Wyatt and these guys. But does that mean their careers are sabotaged? Does that mean that they are screwed? I couldn't answer that. But I do find it really strange that he comes back and not do creative. I mean, at the very least, he'll help market WrestleMania. That's right around the corner. I'm just worried because I don't want guys like Goldberg to come back and nonsense like this. I mean, there were a bunch of guys. There's been rumors about Miro in WWE or in AEW wanting to go back to WWE. Regal just started with them on Wednesday again in WWE. This is going to be interesting. The backstage stories are going to be really interesting. Those that get out about what's going to happen. Either way, the WWE sale is happening. One way or another, it's happening. And don't be surprised if we see that soon, which will be just as big of a news story as Vince McMahon coming back or leaving. You have to remember something too, y'all. Look at it from Vince's perspective. Vince elevated this company. He bought it from his dad in '82, and since then he elevated it to international status. WrestleMania, the various pay-per-views, the international shows, TV deals. WWE is a huge company because of the work that Vince and Linda have done since the 80s. So I understand WWE being like his baby. You got to look at it from that perspective. Pretend that you were Vince. Put yourself in Vince's shoes, right? I get it. I totally get it. I see why he wants to come back. Now, do I want him back as a fan? I don't. I think that he made Raw kind of boring, and he's got his Vince-isms, but what can we do? We have no power. Either way, the fact that he's got majority ownership means he's still the boss, and he can come in and reassign himself, and that's what he's doing. Hopefully, folks, it'll just be for the sale, and it won't be for creative, and he actually lets Triple H work. I don't want to see Karrion Kross back in that gimp mask ever again. You understand? Anyways, y'all, those are my thoughts on it. It is legit. He's back. It is what it is. Take care. I'm sure SmackDown tonight will be interesting, to say the least. Take care of yourself, all right? We'll talk soon.